All right. What are some other things, more practical things that you can do to prepare and make sure that your property is ready ahead of a natural disaster? We're here to help you with that. And if you like that, or that resonates with you, like and subscribe to this channel, because that's what we're all about. So heading into hurricane season of 2024, a lot of people have on their minds about natural disasters and how it affects them and their HOA. So we want to make a little video just to get on people's radar some of the things that they can and should be looking for if they live in an HOA. The first and most important thing is good insurance policies, right? So there's two separate policies. One is at the association level, and then the other is at the homeowner's level. And so the homeowner policies, depending on what kind of unit or what kind of property they have, if it's a condo or a standalone home, is going to be an HO3 policy or an HO6 policy. And the most important things with regards to those is that they align their limits, align well with whatever the association has as a master insurance policy. You want to make sure that you have enough coverage to meet the deductibles. You also want to make sure that you are covered for any unusual risks that your area might be prone to. So here in the Northeast, we've had, as a result of climate change, torrential downpours. We're talking 3 to 6 inches in a single rainstorm, as well as microbursts where trees have been falling on places, falling on people, not necessarily people so much, but falling on structures. So you want to make sure that whatever risk or exposure you have in your area, your insurance policy covers. Prior to the last few years, we maybe had a rainstorm of that caliber once every 10 years. Now we're getting, 2 to 3 substantial rainstorms a year, which means water going in basements, water going in buildings, water coming from the roof, trees falling on the roof. All of those things are happening at a higher rate and frequency here in the Northeast. Down south, we're having an increase in hurricanes, right? So what does that mean for insurance and for your HOA? Well, if you're a place that's prone to flooding, you might want to consider a flood policy or flood coverage. Most master policies, and HO6s for that matter, will have what's called a groundwater exclusion on the policy, which means that as soon as the water touches the ground, any damage that it does is no longer a coverable damage by the insurance company. Essentially what they're saying is the only thing that they cover is like a broken pipe or a backed up pipe or a broken, water line or something like that. But if the water's coming from a natural source and it's not like coming through the roof or coming through the siding, it's going into the ground and then the groundwater is coming into the building, which is something that's been happening more and more frequently on our properties, just being in New England. The insurance company will not cover any damages as a result of that. So it's important that your insurance policy covers that risk. To mitigate that, we consider adding another flood policy or a flood rider or an add-on that covers flooding or groundwater. How about if you're a unit owner? You want to make sure that all the things in your unit are fully covered. You want to make sure your furniture is covered. You want to make sure that it pays for a hotel if you're displaced. You want to make sure that you are insulated, and that if something happens to the building and the master policy says, okay, we're going to rebuild the structure, that you have a policy that says, hey, we're going to replace your furniture and your valuable items, and we're going to put you in a hotel until or somewhere else until your place is repaired. So those are some things that you want to look for in your own policy. You also want to make sure that the association has what's called a full replacement coverage, as opposed to cash value. What that means is the insurance company, if there's a total loss, the place burns down or, floats away during a flood, that the insurance company will pay to rebuild the structure as it stood previously, as close as possible, obviously with new materials, versus just paying out a cash value of what they think it was worth, and it may not actually cover what it costs to rebuild. In which case you get some money, but you don't have a house back, is essentially what you're trying to protect against. So the way to make sure that you have a place to live after an enormous natural disaster is to ensure that you have full replacement coverage. All right, what are some other things, more practical things that you can do to prepare and make sure that your property is ready ahead of a natural disaster? One is just look at the weather patterns and trends in the weather. Look for changes in weather patterns in your area. Is it getting hotter? Is it getting colder? Is there more rain? Is there less rain? Are fires a greater concern than they used to be? Is flooding a greater concern than it used to be? Are you getting tornadoes where normally there weren't tornadoes? Here in the Northeast, we're getting tornadoes and microbursts more frequently, even though the Northeast, New England, is not an area that is historically notorious for tornadoes. We're getting them. If you're in the Midwest, you're getting much more tornadoes than you used to. If you're down south, you're getting much more hurricanes than you used to. All of these things are relevant, and what you want to do is try to find the weak spots in your association and make sure that you've fixed the problems that you can fix, right? So if we know that there's an area that's getting tremendous water runoff whenever there's a big rainstorm, well, put in some drainage. Try to divert the water somehow. You know it only happens 2-3 times a year, but you know when it happens, it's going into the building. One of the things that we've seen is water getting in basements. At one property we have, the buildings are built on hills, right? So every time there's a big rainstorm, what's happening is that the water's getting into the basement. And as we're investigating what's causing this, because there's no cracks in the foundation, there's nowhere in the foundation where we see the water coming in, but we start to figure out that the rainwater has pushed dirt and sediment against the front of the structure. And what's happening is that, let's say the top of the foundation wall is here and the siding starts here. Well, now as dirt and sediment has built up over the front, now the dirt line is here. So what's happening is the groundwater is traveling, hitting the foundation wall and going up and over and into the building. So what's the solution to that? It's to cut all this dirt back and bring the dirt level to substantially below the foundation line. That's six inches below. So it's a simple solution. It's not super expensive. And just with a little bit of care and paying attention to it, we're able to resolve a pretty big problem. We see other vendors or contractors saying, oh, you need to put a big drainage system and all this or that. When we look at it, it's just, well, it's built on a hill. And if we cut the dirt back, then the water won't go hit the foundation and go over via its surface travel. It'll hit the foundation and go down below it. And so that solves that problem. But if you've had one or two events of a substantial natural event that has caused flooding, or it's caused, you're in a wooded area and you've had a tree hit a building or whatever the case is, start to be proactive. If you've had one or two insurance claims for trees, maybe start pruning trees on a regular basis. Maybe once a year you set aside $5,000 to go look at the most at-risk trees and cut them down. Or if you're in an area that you're getting substantial flooding or groundwater runoff or surface water runoff, well, can we install a drainage system? Can we find a way to divert the traffic, or not divert traffic, divert water flow? Can we put something in place that mitigates whatever risk there is? And as the weather patterns change, there's going to be certain risk areas that get greater and greater, right? We had one property where their vents, the vents coming out of the fireplace were put at a 90-degree angle, so as water not to be able to go directly into the vent. Well, with the crazy rainstorms we've been having that have sideways rain, if the wind is blowing in exactly the right direction, it can still blow the water into that vent even though it's turned at a 90-degree angle. Okay, so what's the solution to that? Do we put another 90 on it? Do we do something different? Because the way that it's set up right now, water is getting into the vent and going down into the fireplace that gets vented via that pipe. So we want to think creatively. We want to try to find the solutions in between dramatic weather events and not just say, hey, this is the type of storm we've had. It's a once every 10-year storm. It's not going to happen again. Plan on it happening again and making adjustments accordingly. Between those two things, just being proactive and paying to mitigate certain risk factors and also making sure you have the right insurance policies in place, you are going to be pretty well protected, or at least have good plans in place in the event that you have a natural disaster. And finally, if you do end up with a natural disaster, work closely with your management company if you have one. Make sure that you have a really good insurance agent that's competent in the condo or HOA space and that they're working with you closely. and make sure that you have a good attorney as well that can represent the association. All of those things are important in the event of a catastrophic loss. One of the biggest mistakes that I see the HOAs make is not working with an insurance agent that specializes in condo and HOA policies. It's a very unique market. There are much fewer players in the HOA and condo market as far as master insurance policies. And there's a lot of nuances to the policies, and the coverage isn't always as straightforward as you think it would think it is. Here in Connecticut, we have Bouvier Insurance, which is really good. They specialize in condo insurance, and we work with them for most of our properties. They really have the ability to guide us into the policies that best fit each of our communities and make sure that we have the adequate and appropriate coverages in place. And it's not just the lowest cost policy, it's where's the intersection of low cost and great coverage? Where's the intersection of, best value based on the association's needs, knowing what the association's risks are? For those reasons, you want to make sure that you're working with reputable professionals that deal with this day in and day out. Insurance losses are an inevitability. Eventually they will happen. The question is just how big they're going to be and what have you done to mitigate those risks? And it's something that certainly we want to be looking at, not just seasonally, but also, once we take inventory for the season and see what kind of storms we had and what damage was done, how can we be better prepared next season to address those issues or get ahead of them so that we don't keep incurring the same losses? Because that's the biggest way to get dropped by an insurance company or have our premiums go through the roof, is if the insurance companies see more than a single loss around a given situation at a time, right? So if you are prone to having flooding in the basements, or if you are prone to having, burst pipes, or whatever the case is, if an insurance company sees multiple claims for the same issue at your complex, they're going to flag that. And ultimately, it's going to lead to a loss of insurance or crazy high premiums. In both those scenarios, the unit owners lose, and having their HOA dues have to go up dramatically to be able to cover those incidents. Let me wrap up with this. There is a strategy that we use to ensure that when there is a loss, we protect the association and we have as much of that loss be paid out by the individual affected unit owner's HO6 or HO3 policy. We talk about that in our course. It's a very nuanced process, but it's really effective to protecting all of the homeowners, all of the unit owners in the association. Because what's going to happen is that if you get a loss and you put a claim in on the master policy and the master policy goes up by 30%, then everybody's HOA dues, at least the portion of their HOA dues that are covering the master policy, are all going to go up by 30%. Whereas if you have a claim and you're able to get most of the claim or most of the damages paid for by the individual unit owner's policy, then maybe their policy will go up by 30%, but everybody else in the association, their policy or their cost to live there will be about the same. And relatively speaking, the homeowner's policy is very inexpensive. We're talking a couple $100s a year. So 30% on that's what, $60 versus a year versus, a $60,000 master policy going up by 30% goes up by $20,000. And that $20,000 gets split by everybody in the association. So everybody's HOA dues may go up by $60 a year. So we want to put strategies in place that mitigate those risks and have a plan in place to make sure that the association is protected against these events. We have a course. If you're interested in learning more about that, check out the course. It's very affordable right now. It's $9 a month at the time of this filming. It'll go up as more people subscribe to it. But we talk about all of these intricacies and nuances and help you be the most prepared and most educated about how to make sure that your HOA experience is the best it can be. All right. Thank you guys again. This is Jared with HOA Crusaders. We'll catch you next time. Thanks again. This is Jared with HOA Crusades. We'll talk to you later.